All right, it looks like we are live, we are up and running. So I'm hoping if you are listening and if you can hear us, please just pop a comment in the comments tab. I can see all the comments as they happen. So let me know that you're here. Let me know that you're watching. And we're going to leave it a few minutes just to let people come on in. It is a Saturday afternoon after all. But once everybody's here, we will get going, and we will begin. So perfect. I can see that we're live. I've got my little double screen down here, and brilliant. And we've got a couple of people who can hear me and who can see us. Okay, perfect. All right. Good. We are all here and we're starting to see people appear. How's your Saturday been, Cam?
It's been pretty good, thank you. Yeah. Just a little bit of work earlier in the morning, a couple of clients, and then doing some prep for this. Really exciting. Yeah. Just getting into
a conversation yesterday.
Absolutely. Getting immersed in the world of Oxford versus Cambridge, getting ready for the battle.
Everyone always assumes that the two universities kind of really don't like each other, and I thought that when I first of all applied, I was like, oh, they must really hate each other. Obviously now I work with both universities, and so there is a bit less of a rivalry, but it's still quite fun to have that slight battle between them. So it's a little bit in jest, but there are clear differences between them, which is good.
Yeah.
All right. Perfect. So it looks like we have people who are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome. And everyone's telling me that we are coming through nice and clear. So I think we're probably ready to start and probably ready to go. Perfect. So here we go. Ooh, there we are. So welcome, everybody, to the Oxford University journey. And if this is the first live that you are joining, welcome. If you're watching this on catch up, welcome. If you're watching this live right now, special welcome to you guys. And I'm looking forward to this because it is the first live that I am doing with somebody else, and I am delighted that I am joined by Cam. And I realised that I spelt your name wrong right now. Look at that.
It's all right. It's just
I misspell when I'm writing.
Brought together.
So I am joined by Cam, who is a Cambridge graduate, and we are here today to discuss the difference between Cambridge and Oxford. And as someone who has only been to one of those universities, I thought I would bring Cam along to share his experiences at Cambridge. And why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about what you do.
Absolutely, yes. So thank you so much, Gemma, for having me. I mean, it's such a pleasure. And from my side of things, I love hearing more about your Oxford experiences as well. From my side of things, so just so that everyone listening is aware, my background, I was at QE Boys School, good grammar school, enjoyed my time there somewhat. Discipline was a bit rough every now and again, but in terms of the academic side, I mean, they were pretty great, very supportive of me throughout my time there. And I ended up studying maths, physics, chemistry, and further maths at A level. And after a bit of confusion about whether I should drop further maths in my second year of A levels or not, Cambridge gave me an offer with an A star in further maths specified. So that made that decision for me. So there I was, having to just stick with all those subjects. And the subject they gave me an offer for was for chemical engineering via first year natural sciences. So natural sciences was my first year, chemical engineering would be what I specialized in my second year. Now, as you might be able to see from the slide, then there was a bit of a direction shift in my third year, which I then moved into manufacturing engineering. And we can get into the reasons of the jumps between it and during this talk and what the benefits of it were, what the challenges of it were and everything. But I stayed there, got a first class degree in the end of my third year, stayed on for a master's in manufacturing engineering in my fourth, following which I went and did what a lot of students at Oxbridge do. And I went and became a management consultant in the city. But at some point, I kind of realized in that journey that my real passion was around mentoring and coaching. That was partly to do with my sports background, partly to do with the stuff I figured out, the soul searching I did in an environment like Cambridge. And so I left my role in management consulting in 2016 or so, July 2016. And so I have been doing this ever since as a performance and mindset coach. So performance psychology, cultivating the mindset that you need in order to help you succeed, but also stay mentally and physically well. And as part of that, I go to schools, I give talks at schools, universities, and companies. And I founded Exam Success Academy, which is a online program to help students build those skills that are so essential for exams, but are not taught at school, like time management, mindset, and so on. That's all for a bit later. But that is my introduction. It's so lovely to be here.
Perfect. And I think that oddly mimics, and one of the reasons that I thought was quite interesting, because it kind of mimics my area, but I did the opposite. So I went to a girls' grammar. I went to Chelmsford County High. I went to Oxford. I would have chosen the natural sciences route had I been at Cambridge. But I took the biochemistry route in Oxford, and I think that's something later that we'll discuss about how we made those decisions. Like Cam, I also went into consultancy once I'd finished doing. I did my BSc. I did intercalated masters. So I did my masters in human genetics is what I focused in, and I went into strategy consultancy. I exited a lot quicker than needed, probably under 9 months, and I was straight back into education, working for Oxford Royale Academy and working on their summer schools and their gap year programs. I also went back to Oxford a few years ago, and as a older, mature student, I did my PGCE. So that was a very different kind of vibe than when I did my undergrad. Likewise, I think a lot of people know that I run the education hotel, but some people don't necessarily know that I act as a university's consultant for a couple of different companies. So a couple of years ago, was really happy. I got to go to China with the Quintessentially group. They're kind of like a members lifestyle club, and to offer their Chinese clients this exact talk, basically. So Oxford versus Cambridge. How do you look at Oxbridge? And that really made, for me, it was one of the greatest things that I've done, being able to go around and being able to speak to parents about Oxford and Cambridge. And there were some interesting quirks. I did have someone ask me what they needed to do for their 12-month or 11-month-old child. Did they need to start that young? But it was a great experience, and it was one that made me certain that this was the type of thing I enjoyed. So I think we've both had a bit of an interesting experience, but it oddly mirrors each other. So I think let's crack on. I've got a couple of questions that I'd love to ask, and this is a lot freer than the usual talks that I do, but really because I think your story, Cam, is so interesting. And so I think, why did you, in your case, pick Cambridge?
Yeah. Oh gosh. I'm sure a lot of parents here are hoping that this was a really calculated decision on my part, and I'm going to have to break their hearts a little bit. I need to give you guys some context, right? My parents never pushed me towards Oxbridge, ever. They really, really were not super fussed about it. They both went to university, did degrees. My dad actually did a PhD in physics, but they were both very much of the kind of mindset that, you go there, great, you don't, doesn't matter in the slightest, do what you kind of enjoy. And from my side of things, that proposed some problems because I wasn't really thinking about Cambridge or Oxford. In fact, my eye was on Loughborough because of sport.
Sports, yeah.
Because of my interest in tennis and basketball, I was like, well, sports would be great to do over there. And the teachers at Q were like, no, with your GCSE grades, you should be looking at Oxbridge. And I thought, well, okay, well, let's have a look at this. And I didn't really know at all what subject to take at A level. Even, deciding that was really tough for me because my GCSEs had all been good, but not great. In modern day equivalent, I'd have gotten a lot of 8s. Not too many nines, but all the subjects were pretty much would have been eights and nines. And I didn't have any passion for any one particular subject, but I kind of was okay at all of them. And so for me, making that decision to do A levels was kind of made again by the school somewhat, who were like, hey, you're doing great in maths. You should take maths, and we'll give you further maths as well to do as well. And I thought that's fine. I like chemistry somewhat, and my dad did some physics, so maybe I'll take that as my fourth subject, and he can help me out during my A levels. How wrong I was, but still, that was where I made those subject choices. And then the teachers gave me a prospectus and said, take a look at some of the courses you can do with those subjects. And I came across one called chemical engineering, and it said, all right, maths, chemistry, physics, further maths recommended in the Cambridge prospectus. And I thought, that's my subject decisions all made. I'm done, good to go. Didn't really think too much about it, would come to regret that a bit later. Something that now I really, really do try and communicate to students is it is worth thinking a bit more about it than I did. And so with regards to Oxford or Cambridge, well, if I went to Oxford for chemical engineering, I'd have had to do 2 years of general engineering first. And at that point, my confidence in my maths was quite low. As I mentioned at the start, I was thinking of dropping further maths for that final year of A levels anyway. For Cambridge, on the other hand, it was, well, chemical engineering seems like the subject to go for. There's an option called natural sciences. At the time, that didn't have an engineering admissions exam associated with it, or any admissions exam associated with it. And I thought, good, that's pretty decided. So all that was decided for me then with regards to Cambridge was which college to apply to. And again, I wish I could say there was a complex algorithm here. There really wasn't. I went there on a day. I remember it was very sunny, so I got a very good vibe from Cambridge. Whereas with Oxford, I'd gone twice with the school and it would have been cloudy. I didn't like the feel of it. So that was a big factor in my decision making. And I came across a college called Churchill College, which was a bit on the outskirts. So I kind of wanted to be a bit on the outskirts. I didn't want to be in the hustle and bustle in the center. And it looked really modern and prisony from the outside, but inside it was nice and modern. The rooms looked good. And they had these beautiful fields. They had a tennis court, a basketball court, and a gym. And I thought, if I'm coming here, this is home for me. So that was my decision-making process for why I picked Cambridge, why I picked chemical engineering, and why I picked Churchill College.
That's interesting. So I probably have a bit of a different approach to it because my parents left school at 14 and 16. So no one in my family had ever been to uni. And we went to every open day we possibly could because when I first of all started looking at universities, I had no clue at all what the idea was, because although I went to a grammar school and lots of students went to great universities, it wasn't something that was often talked about until you reached sixth form. So I remember, and people who know me on here and from 11 plus journey as well know that I kind of coasted. I didn't really do much great stuff, but I also didn't really do much to stand out behavior wise. I was the quiet one, just kind of coasting along. I had friends who were a lot cleverer than me in terms of specific standout subjects. So it wasn't until I got my GCSEs back and I, like you, scored well in my GCSEs. It was a bit of a shock, though, to my teachers. They hadn't really considered it. So they suddenly realised, oh wait, you could do university, and maybe you could do quite a good university. And they didn't really ever say Oxbridge to me, but I had a tutor at the time. His name was Peter, and he taught at Cambridge. And he was a Irish literature guest lecturer up there, and he still is. He's about 70 odd now, but he still does some occasional guest lecturing. He focuses on Wordsworth. He's like one of those really, really specific experts. When you start thinking about Oxford and Cambridge, he's your archetypal guy. But he had been teaching me how to write essays. I'm dyslexic, and I really struggled with that during GCSEs, which is part of the reason I probably didn't really shine, because I was spending too much time trying to work out what to do. But he saw some kind of potential, and at the end of GCSEs, he invited me to go with my mum up to Cambridge, and he took us around his college and the college that he worked at, and he took us around the department. And Cambridge is quite near to where I grew up. I grew up in Essex. And And I really loved Cambridge. And to me, that was where I was going to apply until I looked into the natural science course. I knew sciences were my thing. Essay writing was not my thing. So for me, A levels were easily picked because it was go for the 4 sciences. So I did biology, chemistry, maths, and physics. And then out of those, I enjoyed the biology and the chemistry more. So what I did was, because of the fact that my parents didn't go to university, we spent so long with prospectuses. I had a giant pile of them. They sat in my room, and we would go through and we'd be like, oh, look at this. Oh, look at where you could live. Oh, look at this. They've got a bus that takes you. And we had no idea. So, so when we were going through, it was like, I wanted to be a forensic scientist because I watched a lot of CSI. And I'd been to a taster weekend at Nottingham. They do like medicine usually, taster weekends, but they had a forensic science one. And I thought, this is great. I'm going to apply to Nottingham. I'm going to do forensic science. And I said this to my teachers, and they were like, you might want to look a little bit higher because your grades for GCSE and your predicted grades are higher than Nottingham. And I was like, but Nottingham does the course I want to do. And so they were like, no, go through these prospectuses and go through the pile that you've ordered and stop looking at like what they do as activities and stop looking at the houses and start looking at the courses. So I kind of was thumbing through going, okay, well, these aren't I don't think I'm interested. I must have, in terms of tours, in terms of looking around universities, I think I toured 20 because because we just were starting from zero. We really were starting from zero. My mum would stick her hand up in the introductory lectures and ask really embarrassing questions. She asked one particular embarrassing one was during the Oxford Open Day or the Cambridge Open Day, and she asked if we needed to bring our own toilet roll. Thanks, Mum. That's one way to really stand out. Yeah. But we had no idea. So what I did was started looking through all of the first year courses, and I looked at what does it mean to do the first year in natural sciences at Durham? What does it mean to do the first year in natural sciences at Cambridge? And I really loved the Durham course, but I found the Cambridge course had a lot of math. And I, like you, was worried about my math ability, which is what caused me then to apply to Oxford for biochemistry. Because for me, it was, I'm not going to make it through this first year of maths, and it's going to be too broad and too difficult. I am instead going to go for, and I found that biochemistry was the subject I wanted, and it took me a long time. It took me, I had to go to Durham and I went to see the natural sciences course. I remember going to a couple of universities and feeling like, that's the one. I think that's a subject that I find interesting, bits that I like in it, not everything. But there were definite parts in the course and in the prospectus and in the first year. And that's what I say to my students is, do look at the first year. The first year is what you're going to be doing. Beyond then, as you have demonstrated, you can go a bit off-piste. So don't base it on the third year. Don't say, there's a module really in the third year that I want to do. Because by the time you get there, it might not exist. So first year, really pick, and for me, biochemistry was the thing that stood out. I did consider applying, and I don't know if you did this actually. Did you apply for, when you put your personal statement in, were they all natural sciences? Were they all chemical engineering? How did you do it?
For me, so I went all chemical engineering. So the other course I applied to were chemical engineering at Imperial, at UCL, at Loughborough, my favorite, and at Nottingham. Those are the ones that I applied for. And so for me, my personal statement was the first paragraph that was chemical engineering focused, and in my next paragraph, kind of when I was relating it more to my subjects and stuff, it was showing that I had the ability to do a natural sciences course. Of course, I'm sure we'll get onto it with Cambridge because of the grades I had and that my personal statement was baseline acceptable. It meant that then the interview would be where I could showcase whether or not I could handle the demands of a natural sciences course. For the other universities, the personal statement probably mattered a bit more. But when you have the grades, I guess, we're looking at, we're more likely to get the interview in the first place. So I wasn't too. If I look at my personal statement now, because I do look at students' personal statements, I am appalled by it. It's terrible. It's really terrible, and the job. So it's
Mine sounds very pretentious, and I always look at it and go, "Why did I write this?" But it does show an interest, and it shows it. Mine was a bit unusual because I I wrote about visiting Disneyland
okay.
because in Epcot, which is like Disney World's like Discovery Village, they had some genetic modification and some genetically modified cotton plants. And that
Wow.
was something that I was really interested in. I was really interested in genetics, and it's followed me. It's something I am still really interested in. So, yeah, so that was something that ended up in my statement. Bit unusual, but as I've mentioned before on the personal statement stuff, you need a story, and that was where that kind of first love came from. All right, I think we probably covered the next one as well, actually. But let's have a look. Yeah, why do we pick our course? So you picked it because it was kind of picked for you.
Yeah.
And
It's the thing I just add to that was that look, the thing was said my dad came from this more scientific background and stuff, and he knew as much as I knew that I had no idea what I wanted to do in the future. So for him, it was like what made sense was that with engineering, you keep your doors open. It's a versatile course. That's how chemical engineering always kind of in my mind, that was the word I associate with it. It's a versatile course. You can go into many different industries having studied it. So again, in hindsight, and especially in light of what I'm doing now, and even what my interests were back then, there were many other subjects that perhaps I would have enjoyed so much more. But I don't regret choosing engineering. I don't regret choosing that pathway I took, because even to this day in what I do now and the way it's taught me to think about problems, I'm really grateful for that. So for me, I don't have any problems with it, but I would have liked to have, could I, and what I recommend to students is don't choose it for don't make the decision blindly. It does make a huge difference to your quality of life and the experience that you have at university, for sure.
yeah, and I think it's interesting that both of us have not gone into scientific courses. Everyone else on my course did. Everyone else in my college. So there's four of us that did biochemistry at my college, which was Oriel, which might sound a little bit odd if people are listening, but in terms of the collegiate system, your college is where you live, but you will study with everyone from all other colleges for the lectures. So there was four of us from one, four of us from a different college, and we'd all come together for those lectures. But of those, we were four girls in my year, and three of them went on to do PhDs. And of those three, two of them now work in science, and one of them is now in San Francisco building up to running her own lab. I am the odd one out. I don't know about you. I don't know what did people do after yours?
I mean, majority of natural scientists from my college, in Churchill College that I'm still close with, work in consulting, work in banking, or work in oil and gas. From manufacturing engineering, which I then specialized in, almost every one of them is either in some form of consulting. Now maybe they've pivoted to something more specific, so an industry that they've chosen. One or two are entrepreneurs running their own companies, creating great products and stuff, doing incredibly well. And then there's a few who are still in academia in those areas too. But I'd say they were the minority, actually.
Interesting. Because
Manufacturing,
that's something that I find Oxford and Cambridge often push, is
yeah.
the very academic career path.
Yes.
So
I think
for me, it was a bit odd not to do it.
Yeah. For the manufacturing engineering course, they know that people who are going to do that one, specializing in their third year, they're very much more interested in like building the foundations to go and apply these things in industry in some capacity. So their aim is not to necessarily get you into academia, but to get you into industry, the engineering or manufacturing industry, which not majority of students don't do. But that's the price they pay when their sponsors are consulting firms as well. So, it's hard to gauge.
Yeah. Interesting. And do you think of another course that you would have maybe enjoyed? You mentioned that you don't regret doing chemical engineering. I don't regret doing biochemistry. I learned some amazing stuff. I studied something I was really interested in, but I think there probably is a course that would have suited me more. I don't know whether there is for you.
I mean, again, it's so hard to tell, right? Because now what I'm doing, right, which is so focused around things like psychology and neuroscience and these kind of areas, which I love. I'm going to be honest, when I was 16, 17 years old, I didn't really think about those things.
No.
That 16, 17-year-old self could not have imagined me doing what I'm doing now. They wouldn't have imagined that in the slightest. So I think it is quite unfair of me to go, oh, I would have enjoyed that then. I think I would have benefited from it in a different way. But the reason why I say that I'm grateful I did engineering was because the truth is in going into the field that I'm in now, right? If I go to a company and I try and approach them to deliver a talk or something like that, they're just a bit more likely to take me seriously in a way and go, okay, he's doing this because he really wants to and is probably okay at it, as opposed to he's doing it because he has to and has nothing else to do. Because the Cambridge engineering degree has that. And there's the whole thing with the network, the kind of people you meet along that journey. So I would say that I don't regret it. And said, getting into the third year story and stuff, which we can again do a bit later, I learned so much more because I was doing a degree I didn't enjoy, because I had to find out how to motivate myself. You know, how can I create that motivation? How can I reduce my anxiety and my stress to drive myself to do something I'm not even interested in? And that taught me so many of the foundations that I now teach today. So I think it's indirectly been such a blessing, right?
So for me, like, I loved biochemistry, and I still do. And I still really like the human genetics side of it. And interesting, again, kind of the overlap between our interests. If I was given the opportunity to do a PhD with no kind of external pressures, I'd do it in neuroscience.
Yes.
So that kind of basis, that mix between kind of the psychology stuff and the biochemistry stuff,
Absolutely.
that to me was great. I think I probably would have, if I was doing it now, I'd look at experimental psychology. But I didn't take psychology as an A level, and it was available at my school. And I had this weird preconception that because it was available at my school, if I hadn't taken it for A level, I just couldn't do it for university.
Yeah. It's such a bad one. I mean, QE don't even teach psychology, and it's not considered a prestigious A level, unfortunately. But the people I know who've done it and the ones who've enjoyed it, they found it so helpful as a foundation for so many other things. You know, especially if someone is interested in a career in anything to do with marketing, anything to do with branding, anything to do with user experience design, of any of these kind of professions. Your knowledge of psychology is so important. In psychology, you also learn a lot about, you know, running experiments and different studies and stuff like that. These are really important things to know in many different kind of fields, and the quality of how you do research and stuff. We could go on about that for a long time, but it is such a shame that like some of these courses, they're just not given any respect, I guess, and they're not considered prestigious enough, but they are very valuable. So
And I think on the flip side of that, it's also worth noting that you don't have to have studied them to do the university course.
absolutely.
Which I automatically discounted. I discounted law, I discounted psychology. I don't know why I didn't discount biochemistry, because I think I was like, I've done biology and chemistry, therefore I can do biochemistry. But I had it very fixed in my mind that I couldn't do something that I hadn't studied before. And actually, that's what university brings. It brings that ability to do something. So if you have a student who is looking to do law, or they want to do psychology, or they want to do something that maybe their school doesn't do, that's not holding them back from university in it, because ultimately, you know, it's there to widen, and there are many different courses that don't need that course. And in fact, I say to my students, if they're looking at something like law, you probably don't want to take it for A level. It's not one of the ones that's as well recognized, and instead probably take something like history or politics or English and work on it that way. But yeah, it's interesting, those types of conceptions, I think.
Well, at Cambridge, I know that with law, you know, a lot of my friends would often say, like, the idea is, like, you're going to Cambridge or to Oxford and any other university to learn. You're not going there to know it already, and they're going to teach you law. They're going to teach you that. But learning the skills of structuring essays, learning the skills in terms of your fundamental ability to write coherent pieces and link them up and so on, that is what you needed kind of as a prerequisite to want to study these courses. And that's harder to teach. So in some ways, they want you to have that foundation, because the content, that's what they're there to teach you to a large extent as well.
And
So
actually, did you, for your natural sciences, did you have to write essays?
So this is a great question. So with natural sciences at Cambridge, you basically get to choose the modules you want to study. So what happens is you get to choose 3 modules, and then you have to choose a 4th one, which is a maths-based one. So the 3 would be, for example, I was a physical sciences side. So I chose physics, chemistry, and material sciences.
Okay.
Other students kind of going down this route would choose something like geology or earth sciences instead, for example. And then you could either pick Maths B, which was extra maths, Maths A, which was a standard one. And on the other side, you had this biological natural sciences kind of option where your subjects could be everything from biology of cells to plants to physiology, through to the more essay-based ones like evolution and behavior, which hindsight I'd have found interesting. And then you could do mathematics for biologists, which was more statistically focused, because that's really important for that. And what happens is in that year, if you pick something like evolution and behavior, you would have some essays, and then you can specialize in your second year and your third year into history and philosophy of science or evolution and behavior, which are pure essay subjects. With engineering as well, much less scope for essays and stuff like that. But part of the reason I chose manufacturing engineering was because we did have modules which were more business related, which were essay based, which was something I'd always kind of been quite strong at. Whereas I was finding now my mathematical ability was a lot weaker. So there is an opportunity to be writing essays if you pick those options. But if you're studying physics or chemistry, you won't have essays. You'll just have lab reports and stuff like that. And then maybe a dissertation if you then move into your 3rd or 4th year kind of thing.
That's the complete opposite of doing biochemistry. So as I said, I did science-based subjects at A level, and I did them because I thought I couldn't write essays. Turns out it's because I'm dyslexic, and the structuring problem was there. But I entered my first year at Oxford, and suddenly biochemistry is a full essay-based subject. There's no problems. There is, for your first year, you do a math module and you do a chemistry module, and the organic chemistry is problem sets. Everything else is essays. And suddenly, I was thrown into doing all these essays, and I hadn't considered it. The other difference between Oxford and Cambridge, especially in the natural sciences, is you had choice. I did not. There was no choice until I reached the 4th year. So it was very, very set within the sciences. So almost in Oxford, you've got that choice to study the subject that you might want, whether that's chemistry or biochemistry or physics. But within those individual sections, you don't get as much choice as if you were to pick something like the natural sciences tripos. You'd all be studying the same thing, but you would be able to do a lot of different options. So that's why I think we're saying, both of us, it's really important to read through the prospectus. It's really important to look at the first year, because that's going to make a big difference. Don't underestimate the ability of being able to choose what you want to do. I chose biochemistry, and I knew I didn't get any choice in it. And I was happy to not get any choice in it, because I knew I wanted a really strong basis and grounding. And everyone studied the same thing until our 3rd year. And then we did a bit of specialization. But I didn't estimate how much essay based there was. So it's really about reading and really about digging into that course.
I think engineers have a similar thing where, if you're someone who, for example, you want to go into one form of engineering, Oxbridge might be a challenging one to go for, because you'll do general engineering for 2 years. That means, you might love the aeronautical and mechanical side, but you might not like the electrical side. And if you really struggle with it, you'll fall behind. And I think these are things which you only get by speaking to students who've been there, or going into the prospectus, doing your research and so on, because I know a lot of students who were taken by shock through that process, and it really meant their first 2 years were very challenging, and it had implications for then the 3rd year courses they could select. So I think it's really important to go into it knowing kind of for that subject what information is available.
So you briefly mentioned your other universities. How did you choose them? Obviously, Loughborough was an obvious because its sports facilities are just amazing.
It is.
So that makes sense.
So the funny thing is had I actually gone to Loughborough, I would probably not have made their first sports teams for any of the sports I did, because they are that good, and I was very naive in thinking how I had that ability. Loughborough are brilliant for engineering courses. They have great links with industry. So had I actually gone and done chemical engineering there, I probably have ended up in industry to do that. They were not my second choice. My second choice was Imperial, just top class university. And also, I'm from London as well, and it was one of those options that kind of, again, had been considered. So my second option was Imperial College, in order of how it was. So it's Cambridge, then Imperial. Third one was UCL. Why? Simply put, the prestige of it. It's a massive global name. The fourth one was Loughborough. And the fifth one, my kind of safety choice was Nottingham. I didn't know very much about Nottingham. I just thought their offer was kind of an AAB, and that was within my grasp. And I think I got an offer from them very quickly after sending my things.
So it is worth saying, when I did my applications, we had ASs. Was it the same when you?
Yes,
right.
I had AS levels as well. Yeah.
So for parents who are listening, because I get this a lot when it gets to results day, where people say, I picked my safety choice and it was one grade below my firm, or I picked my insurance and it's one grade below my firm. And we had a real problem with it last year. And I know that there are a number of parents who rang me up about it who had either picked their firm and insurance the same grades or had picked one underneath. You don't have the ability now. When we did it, we had ASs in the bag. So I had a fairly easy year 13. I knew what I needed to get, and it wasn't very high.
Lucky
because
you.
I had the ASs in. So everything when I did it was modular. The only thing I had was maths. I resat it every single year. You can't do it now. But I resat every math module.
This is the thing. I'm very open about it. If it wasn't for the fact that I could resit those exams, I wouldn't have made my offer. The way that my school had done it was because we had ASs and we could do it like that. I already knew. I did the whole maths A level in 1 year and the whole third maths one next year.
Yeah.
And I was doing physics and chemistry. Half of it, of course, the AS was done already, and I was on track for A stars in both subjects. And with math, I'd already gotten an A star. So I was actually applying to universities with an A star in maths already, which is
quite different to nowadays.
Super.
We had it a lot easier.
Because then what happened was, the drawback of it was that Cambridge said, oh, we're going to discount that you've already done maths and give you an A star based offer anyway, specializing in further maths, because your maths A star grade was not a high A star. So it did affect me in that way, but it meant that when I then in my A2 year did those further maths exams modules in January and I didn't do very well in them, I then retook them in the summer. So there were advantages and disadvantages, but I'd say mainly advantages to that system in that you had chances to try, whereas now, in COVID, it's a different landscape entirely.
Yeah, and I think in really labouring this point that for students when they're choosing their insurance nowadays, you don't have that fallback. We had the fallback that you could look at your modules and you could already know what you were. If I got a C in this module, I would achieve overall this. And going into the last couple of exams, you pretty much knew where you stood. Now it's not that at all. No. So when you're considering those insurances, both of us have Imperial as our insurance. I wouldn't recommend that nowadays. No way, because oddly, so my Imperial insurance offer was particularly low for the time. I think I had like 3 Bs or an AAB. It's really odd, but
they basically just asked me 2 A's because I already had the A star in maths.
So it was a bit different, and also because of the modular system, you knew how you had to do. I would never recommend someone to take an Oxford or Cambridge first offer and then an Imperial second, because they're so close nowadays, and sometimes they're the same offer. And last year, when we had CAGs and when we had teacher assessed grades, I had a lot of people ring me up and say, I've lost both. And I'd say, well, what were your offers on both? And either they'd be the same or they'd be 1 grade different. And nowadays, it's a really big step to really back yourself to get those grades. I wouldn't do it nowadays.
No. And we've got a comment here that said this AS and A levels details are a little difficult to understand. So let's break it down into what's really relevant for you guys now, right? Which is, forget AS pretty much. Some schools still do it as a way of giving their students A grade. It's still possible. I know QE Boys still does that, though of course with COVID things have changed because exams have been cancelled, these big ones. But what Jemma, what kind of things would you say that parents now just need to know about the way the A-levels exams are structured and what it means for their applications to somewhere like Oxford or elsewhere?
So the way that the A levels are now structured, you take one exam at the end of 2 years, which means that your university place is resting on that one exam at the end of 2 years. You therefore need to be clever with your insurance choice. So when you make an application to the UK, you choose 5 different universities to apply to. At the end of that application, you then choose 2, one of which is called your firm and one of which is your insurance. And the idea is that if you don't make the grades for your firm, then you should make the grades for your insurance choice.
Yes.
If your firm and your insurance choice are very close together, what you are saying is, I am placing all of my hope that that one exam at the end of 2 years is going to be that grade. And if I don't get it, I am fully prepared to take a year out.
Yep. That's the only option you have, or go into the clearing process, but the university that might pick you out may not be of the caliber which you wanted or which you were originally aiming for. And just to clarify, it's not such one exam for each subject kind of thing. It might be it's one set of exams. It's one set of exams in that summer period of your A2, your year 13 year. And yep, I've seen so many students have to take enforced gap years because they weren't able to meet that. And it's almost becoming more common now to do so. Benefits and drawbacks to that, it really depends on the individual, depends on the family's financial situation, a lot of these things. I don't know how relevant that is to the talk today necessarily, but I'm going to give it back to you now, Gemma, to guide as to where we're going next.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, I think we probably could talk for a while about insurance and firm offers, but we're going to keep it on Oxford and Cambridge.
Yeah.
But ultimately, and I think this actually mimics one of the other questions that's been asked in the group. Someone has asked, why could you not apply for both Oxford and Cambridge?
Yes.
Ultimately, you've got 5 places.
Yeah.
And if you're not going to make it to Oxford, you're not going to make it to Cambridge. That's one reason. The second is, if they allowed everyone to apply to both Oxford and Cambridge, everyone would, and it would become twice as hard.
Yeah, they'd be putting out anyone who applies to Oxford with the grades to get the interview stage would also be pretty much guaranteed an interview at Cambridge. So now you're looking at double the interviews, which I don't have the capacity for. So it's going to be the same number of interviews, but for only half the applicants pretty much. And that's already taking so many out of the running. It just wouldn't work out like that. It'd be really unfair. So the other part of it is it really makes you think. It really makes you think about which one would suit you perhaps a bit more. So yeah, definitely a really good thing to discuss why you can't have both.
Yeah, so it is important. Ultimately, you'd also just have people who got both and people who got neither. Whereas nowadays, because you can't, you've never been able to choose both, as far as I know. It might be a very long way back, but not. I think
there's like a music scholarship one where you can apply for both. But one clarification is, if you apply for Cambridge or Oxford and you don't get your offer, the next year you can apply to a different one.
Yeah.
As far as
you also can apply for the same. I know plenty of people who will apply for the same college and the same university and will get in the second time, but not the first. They are they're not allowed to take forward bias. They also remove names and details, and it doesn't prejudice. So choice of university, kind of an interesting one.
Yeah.
This one.
Yeah.
What preconceptions did you have of Oxford or Cambridge?
So my preconceptions, well, okay, so I come from an ethnic background. I mean, I have an Iranian background, right? Both my parents came from Iran during the revolution, and I grew up in an area in North London which was filled with different ethnic minorities. And I went to QE Boys, which is 90% ethnic minorities. So for me, I didn't have a preconception that Cambridge, which is where I applied to, right, was going to be a lot more Anglo-Saxon background. I didn't know that, but when I went there and I saw it on my first day when everyone from my college was sitting on a field, it scared me for about 5 minutes, after which I went and found a group of people who were more representative of what I felt or I connected with. And then before we knew it, within 3 or 4 days, I was friends with or knew everyone, and they're just normal people. We might have different interests in terms of what they want to do on a night out or whatever that is, but that didn't actually impact anything. Some of them to this day from private schools like Eton and stuff are among my closest friends. Others are from international students in any other country, like name, are among my closest friends. So that part of it was a preconception I was glad I didn't have, because it meant I was more open-minded. I think one of the worst things you can go into it with is this: I might not fit in, because you will always be able to find your tribe at Oxford or Cambridge. One of the things I loved was that in our college they had this bar, and the computer scientists would meet there around 10 p.m. and a couple of natural scientists, and they just play World of Warcraft until 4 or 5 in the morning, you know? And in another environment, those kids may have been made fun of, they may have been bullied or something like that. Over here, they were just left to do their thing, and it was wonderful. It made me happy every time I'd come and see them doing that. You know, for me, I got to branch out and meet friends from international backgrounds and enjoy their activities, because again, no preconceptions around that. The only other preconception I had, I guess that was really disproved, was that I thought I would walk on to both to Cambridge's first teams in tennis and in basketball, and I could not have been more wrong. It turns out when you take people who are very driven academically and have that competitive mindset perhaps and apply it to other areas of their lives, they also become really good at many other things. So I thought that, you know, Cambridge tennis, I was a guarantee for the first team, for the Blues team as they call it. Yeah, I was playing with a guy who was representing his entire country in like a national competition. In the girls' team, we had someone who had a world ranking, not a world junior ranking, a professional world ranking in the top 150 in the world. The standard is high. And don't even get me started on basketball, because you have students coming from all over Europe to do PhDs, and they played the exact position as I did, but they were 6'5". Not my So I think that was one of the things. The truth is you take that mindset and you apply it to other things, and they will all be excellent at many things. And I'd say that was one of the preconceptions that was disproved, and I was very glad it was disproved, because I just felt, honestly, it's inspiring to be around people who are so excellent. And
they're
yeah,
really nice.
and they're really
Like,
nice.
they're not big-headed.
Yeah.
I remember meeting when I interviewed. I met somebody who was a Commonwealth swimmer, and
Yeah.
I competed a little bit when I was a child. I was like, oh, you know, I swim for Southeast England, and he was like, yeah, I swim for the Commonwealth. I was like, oh my god. But he was really nice. And
Yeah.
he was really great at biochemistry too. And it was just, you know, they're really just, you want to be like, oh, you're just so good at everything. Something has to be wrong. But no. And they're really humble and they're great. And like I am so glad that
Mhm.
you know, there are people there who have world rankings and people who are top of their field. And we had one of my good friends is a violinist, and you know, a kind of virtuoso violinist, and she was playing in concert halls when she was about 7, and she's just great.
Yeah.
And you know, she it's great hearing her, it's great listening to her. She was there not to study music, she was actually there to study classics, and she loved it too. And that's just, it's a really great thing to be around.
Yeah.
Like,
I think the thing with that I think is really important for all parents to kind of be aware of as well is that, look, the people I found who struggled the most at Oxford and Cambridge, and the ones who found it really challenging, or the ones who perhaps got a bit big-headed, or they felt this need to prove themselves and be over the top compensating in a way, were the ones who had a lot of their identity tied in to their achievements. A lot of their self-worth came from this identity of, oh, I'm smart. Because the truth is if you're basing your identity around being a smart kid, being a smart student, and you've been this big fish in your small little school, you know, and now you go to Oxford or Cambridge and you are just average in a pool of intellectual behemoths who happen to also be great at many things. If your identity is based on that one thing, if you validate yourself based on how you perform compared to others, you will suffer and it will be
Someone's
stressful.
always going to be better than you.
Someone's
And
always going to be better than you.
yeah,
And it's up to you as to whether that's something that inspires you and goes, amazing, I get to learn and be around these people, or it's something that breaks you down, breaks your confidence down. So one thing I try and let parents know as much as we can is, this attitude of like, I guess, the excelling, the getting the grade and how you compare to your peers, it's something they've got to try and let go of by the time they get to Oxford or Cambridge. Otherwise, their mental health will suffer. And it's not an environment where it's tough enough to just try and keep on with your course and keep up to date with that and keep focused on that,
don't
You
be
don't
competitive. You work way better with collaboration.
yeah.
It's something I found in my first year, because I
Mm,
think we came in 4 girls. We're still really close, all 4 of us now.
amazing.
But we came in and we were all fairly competitive in some way or other.
Mm,
And we did come from small ponds. And I think probably that I I I wasn't a big fish in a small pond, because again I hadn't really considered it, but that kind of helped me in the first year,
mm.
because I was all about going and asking people, I don't know how
Yeah.
to do this. But some people did become competitive over it,
Mhm.
and they really struggled because of
Yeah.
that. So definitely.
Really, really worth keeping in mind. Really worth keeping in mind.
I think I've got a couple of preconceptions that
Mm,
I had, picking up off of the kind of the idea that everyone who goes to Oxford is a nerd,
mm.
and I think there's, as you said, that can be a great thing. I have some great friends who are, one of my friends is a math lecturer at Oxford now, and she loves maths, and she will talk about maths all day if you let her, and she will just go, and she's much bigger brain than I have. And I think the difference that I expected everyone to be locked in their room, like just working
Mm,
away. And there are some people who are like that, but there's so many people who want to tell you about
yeah,
their subjects. That was my
yeah.
favorite thing. That was my favorite thing. I was, when I started on a staircase, so I lived with
Mm.
mathematicians. There was two mathematician boys on the bottom. There was two biochemistry girls. Above us, there was two classicists, and right at the top, there was a couple of history. So we had a bit of a really mixed staircase where we lived. So a really mixed kind of communal house. And the best thing was hearing other people talk about their subjects, because they just tell you these really interesting things that I had no idea about. And at the end of my first year, I went to Italy with one of these classicists. The best trip I've ever been on,
Oh, wow.
because she could tell me everything. Like having your own personal tour guide. Like, over here, this is what was happening, and over here,
Yeah.
wow, this is great. And the passion that people have for their subjects. People used to say, because we were 4 girls, we were all really close and we all talked biochemistry. They were like, don't go near the biochemist. The biochemist will just get you talking about genetics. Don't do it. It was kind of a known joke. Don't go near us unless you really want to talk about. But
Mm,
obviously we had interest outside.
yeah,
But it's just that passion that people have. I loved it.
yeah. And the flip side to that are perhaps the economists and lawyers who, for the most part, want to go into investment banking or law, corporate
Yeah,
law. And that is what they talk about. And again, between them, there can be a lot of competition within their own fields, and it can get quite ugly. And again,
yeah,
that cautionary tale of it. It's so wonderful. I cannot echo what you said enough, Gemma. Like, it's so wonderful to meet people who love what they do.
yeah,
It is inspiring, it's energizing to be around. And then the others who become too focused on how they are relative to others and that next stage in their career and competing with their peers to get to those next stages, they suffer. They really
yeah,
do suffer. I'm so glad
definitely.
you had such a good experience, though. I'm so glad that you had those people. I too have a few friends who, again, they're one of them is now like a Harvard professor in an area of Roman classics, and he's just a wealth of knowledge and information in these kind of areas.
Yeah.
It's just so wonderful, like having those people who are
It's the
passionate about it.
conversations. Like
Yeah.
I have a friend of mine who did theology, and I remember having a conversation with him very, very late at night. possibly early morning, about whether science is a belief and ethics. And as a biochemist, it's not something you ever go into. Like
Right.
it is, and to be able to have that academic conversation where you
Mm.
can debate with somebody who knows it from a completely different edge, and he was saying, science is a belief, and I was going, no, it's not. And we were both talking about the kind of opposites and what we could bring to the disagreement, but it was an academic disagreement, and
Yeah.
and at the end of the evening, we still didn't agree, but we'd learned
It's
something from each other.
I think that's one of the blessings of the college system because you're living with people who are not all doing your course. You don't get that tunnel vision. And for me, again, I came into Cambridge being very academically naive, like in the sense of I'd done my subjects and that was really it. And I
Right.
was hanging out with people who were doing philosophy, doing sociopolitical sciences, and I learned all about existential philosophy and absurdism through those guys. And it really were foundational things that changed my experience. I started to read out and get curious because I wanted to listen to these guys and understand what they were saying. I wanted to learn from them, and I'm so grateful for them. Politics, I never knew a thing about, but you
Right.
listen to these politics students speak with each other about these things, and you can't help but just pick things up. So I am just genuinely so grateful to that environment. But again, it's because the ego wasn't there. We wanted
Yeah.
to learn. Whereas if you have that ego and you're trying to prove yourself right in those disagreements with theologists, right? Now you're closed off to it. So it all depends on the attitude you have.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah,
but
and I
very
think that discussion it's not unique to Oxbridge, but it is
no,
something you see a lot of at
yeah,
Oxbridge. Is just those kind of conversations.
definitely,
Um, I
definitely.
think the other preconception, and this was a preconception I had when I was applying, was that Oxford and Cambridge wasn't for me because
Mm,
I came from a grammar school, but
mhm,
I also, as I mentioned, my parents didn't go to, or they didn't pass education beyond 16. My dad
mm,
left at 14, my mum left at 16, and they weren't particularly economically well off. My dad had actually lost his job the year before I went to Oxford, and I was worried that everybody there was going to be from a private school and everyone there was going to be really rich. That was like my
yeah,
my full preconception. And when I went and toured colleges, I was there were some colleges that I went to I didn't feel like I fit in. I had a much broader accent than I have now. I was very noticeably from Essex when I spoke. Um, it's been robbed away over many years now, but but I there was when I went to Oriel, which was my eventual college, I really liked it because of the people who showed me round, and this is why again I think I say so much to people: please go and visit,
yeah,
and and in fact it doesn't matter what college you apply to, provided it does your subject, because if you like it, brilliant. Also, there's pooling, which we'll move on
yeah.
to in a moment, the kind of differences in application. But I went into a college and I felt at home, like you said, I felt at home because the people showing me round were from the north, and were not very posh in my mind. And also because the girl that was showing us round very openly spoke about finance, and it was something that it wasn't something that was really driving where I applied
Mm,
to, but one of my other universities was Imperial, and
mm,
Imperial has a very high cost because it's in London,
mm,
and I was from Essex, so I couldn't live at home if I was going to do the course there. So it was something that was in the back of my mind. And she took us round and she said, and here's the finance office, and here's all the things I think you need to know about finance. She said, Oxford doesn't allow you to work. And I was like, oh no, this isn't going to work for me because I'm not going to be able to afford it.
mm,
And she went, but because they don't allow you to work, that means they've got loads of grants. I was like, okay. And she then proceeded to tell us about the fact that obviously Oxford and Cambridge have very old traditions, and that means they have a lot of benefactors,
mm,
and they want to see people succeed. And
yeah,
she told us about, in particular, this thing called the Oxford Opportunities Bursary, which is for families who kind of fall between the gaps, which was what I ended up receiving in the end. So I ended up receiving a load of bursaries from Oxford, which helped me. It wasn't even an academic bursary because they got all the books that you need. I didn't need anything academically. I spent my Oxford Opportunities bursary on a ski trip, and I was really embarrassed about it. Really embarrassed because I was like, oh no, they've given me this money because they think that I should, spend it on books. I didn't need any books because I had them all at the library. So I spent it on a ski trip. And then there was a meeting. It was a bit of an unusual one because they said, would you like to come and meet the benefactors? And they give us the option, would you want to do it or do you not? Because they'd love to meet you, and they'd love to because typically they chose to put it towards someone from a certain region, or they chose to put it towards somebody who was doing a specific subject. So we had this cocktail evening, and I met the person or the people who'd put towards the opportunities bursary, and they asked me what I'd done with it. And I was so embarrassed, but I was honest. I was like, I learned to ski, and they thought it was the best thing ever.
Oh, that's so nice. Yeah.
Like, of course, as biochemists, you don't need books because they're all in the library, and you don't need anything else because it's all sorted for you. And my college, if you needed something and there was a legitimate reason why you needed it, then 9 times out of 10 they would have put money towards it. And I told this guy who'd funded, I said, I've actually spent it on skiing. I said, I spent some on books. And he was like, this is great, because this is what I hoped someone would do, is use it on something that's fun. And I was like, well, I can ski now, so I've learned something.
That's a brilliant story. I love that. It's
done
yeah,
me well.
yeah,
I now know how to ski. It's a skill I didn't have
yeah,
before. But that was a preconception I had. I thought
yeah.
only rich people went to Oxford.
Nope.
That was me.
I was lucky, right? Because in QE Boys, being a grammar school which gets 20, 30 students into Oxford each year, I got to grow up with these people who were like me. We didn't come from money, and so seeing them go as well and stuff, I didn't have that like preconception too much. I figured they'd be there, they'd just be scattered in and around the place.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm so glad that you had that experience. Um,
And
I'm
you played sports, so you were aware of the sports grants as well.
Yes, exactly. So sports grants were really helpful. The coolest grant I ever found and heard about was one that allowed basically teaching in schools in China through one of the various like Cambridge related camps. And I got my entire flight ticket and everything paid for through one of the funds. And all I had to do in return was write up about my experiences that I had there. So it gave me an incentive to keep a blog.
Yeah.
So
Perfect.
I'd never have gone to China, probably, I couldn't have imagined it before I'd gone there, and it was pretty much entirely paid for by one of these grants. And with the sports stuff as well, with equipment, for tennis, for example, they have grass courts in Cambridge. I've never played on grass in my entire life. It's kind of a high-end thing to do, but we could get specific grass court tennis shoes paid for by the grants and stuff, which was great.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's
one of the best financial places to go is
yeah.
Oxford or Cambridge, because they've got these grant systems.
Yeah, but you've got to know about it, and you've got to put yourself forward. Like I know a lot of students who came from backgrounds where they were financially challenged, and they didn't know how to take advantage of these. They didn't know how to make that approach. So for those of you listening, research it, learn about it, and don't ever be afraid to ask about it and pester
No,
about it.
because they have it for a reason.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I was empowered to do it because of the girl who showed me around. And that's
Exactly.
why I ended up choosing my college. And she actually was a biochemist. She was the year above me, and so she became my college mum, which is
college
essentially
parents.
someone who is the year above, who kind of takes you under their wing a little bit when you start.
Indeed. Yeah, absolutely, a mentor-like figure. Yeah.
Interesting. We are going over an hour, but as long as you're okay, I am good to keep going. You're all right
Yeah,
to keep
I'm
going?
absolutely okay for a little bit. I'm enjoying this, and I said I just hope it's valuable, and I know that this resource will be one that can be shared for time to come. So I hope that I said it within it is just that right blend of information and also fun anecdotes to keep it light. So I'm happy to keep going for a bit more. Yeah, for sure.
Perfect. So what do you think were the advantages to studying Oxford/Cambridge?
Well, I would say the biggest advantages, and this is going to be an answer that I guess there's multiple facets to it, right? One of them is it made it easier for doors to be open for my future, right? It's
100%.
one of the biggest answers. Getting into strategy consulting, which is one of the branches of management consulting, which I also went into, is not easy to do as a grad. They will recruit from very select few schools, and the process is quite rigorous in terms of case studies and interviews. And going to Cambridge and having done a bit of experience, now just going there, by the way, is not enough. You have to have done some experience, just so parents are aware as well. Things are changing now. That degree is a prerequisite almost. For one of these top unis, getting a good grade, the experience is what matters. But it just made that door a little easier for me to open. And as I said earlier, and what I'm doing now, even, it helps a lot. With the stuff I work with, Exam Success Academy, it may not have had the impact it has because if I didn't go to Cambridge and go from getting the lowest grade in my first year to then getting a first class, it wouldn't have been as much of that process of that learning to it. For me, the biggest advantage, though, was this was one of the advantages we all expect. The most unexpected one, two things I'm going to say. One is the friends I made and the people I met. I've met some of my closest friends from there who to this day, like my entire circle is surrounded by them, all different backgrounds. Some I met on day 2 in my college from international backgrounds. Others I met through the tennis team. Others I met through random intersections of events here and there in just ways you can't even imagine.
But I met my partner at Oxford.
Yeah. So my partner from Cambridge as well, but I didn't meet her when I was studying there. I met her after. But it's just similar-minded people you like to think in terms of that growth mindset, in terms of like that desire to learn, that intellectual curiosity, right? So that was superb. And I'd say for me, the biggest thing was it was a testing ground for me to figure out myself. Because when I went through my third year period, I'm not going to bore you guys with a story today, but I went through a really rough period of mental health at the start of my third year. And I mentioned just earlier, in my first year, I came to Cambridge. I had the wrong attitude, right? I came in with this mindset of, I'm almost afraid to do my best because I'm too afraid to try and fail and find out I really didn't deserve to be here. So I didn't work as hard as I should have done, really, because I was so afraid of that. And the prophecy happened. I ended up doing terribly. Lowest grade in my college in natural sciences. Overall, 567th out of 619 students, or somewhere very close to that in that. And I got a letter from my director of studies saying, I know you're moving to chemical engineering, but this does need to be addressed. And they kind of had me a bit of that probation, so to speak. The thing that worked in my favor was the supervision system meant I'd really engaged in those. And so my supervisors were surprised that I'd underperformed because they thought I'd have done better than that. And that saved me to a large extent because I had a track record for them enjoying their interactions with me in these kind of more intimate 2-to-1 situations kind of thing.
Yeah. And just to highlight that in Oxford, it's called tutorials. In Cambridge, it's called supervisions.
Yeah,
they are the same thing.
Same thing, absolutely same thing. But don't use the wrong one in the other place. They won't like it. So Cambridge is supervisions, Oxford tutorials. In my second year doing chemical engineering, I really struggled because that summer before that, I did my internship at a chemical engineering company and I did not enjoy it. So I was about to study a course at Cambridge in my second year, which I've been waiting for, which I just found out I don't like the kind of jobs that it leads to. So my motivation was struggling, but I really didn't want to repeat that first year situation where I'd held back from doing my best. I really didn't want to experience that regret again, that feeling of shame, that disappointment. So I gave it my all that year, a lot more so, and I still ended up falling short. I got 0.2% less than the grade I needed for a 2-1, 59.8%. And that period, that summer, before I went back to Cambridge for my third year, where I decided on manufacturing engineering, a lot of things outside the academic side was kind of falling apart. Academically, of course, my confidence was quite low, and I hadn't gotten any internships to come because the consulting firms had all rejected me. But in my personal life, a relationship had ended quite badly. I had picked up some really bad back issues because I'd been overcompensating with my kind of like the things I was going through trying to do too much sport, my escape mechanism for life, which does not work. It's not sustainable. And I'd lost a lot of friends because I'd put too much time into the relationship. All these little things came together. And when I went back to Cambridge in my third year, I really spiraled. I was living alone, didn't have very many friends at all anymore. I wasn't enjoying my course, and I felt like I'd really failed and let down my family. My own imagination, but your imagination can be very harmful in these situations. And for me, that was my lowest period ever, in terms of what I suffered, in terms of the thoughts I had, in terms of the fact that I needed help. And the one thing that saved me, not just from dropping out of Cambridge, but perhaps a more serious action or gesture, was that I reached out for help. I reached out for help, and I was very fortunate. My mother's a yoga teacher and mindfulness practitioner and therapist, and I finally let go of this pride and said, "Teach me, because I'm really in a low place right now. I can't get out of bed. I don't know, but I know I want to change this, because this is it. I can't keep doing things this way." And bless her, she helped me every single day for the first 2 months of that first term, in my third year. And that process was the learning, and Cambridge became the catalyst. It became what, oh, not so much a catalyst, but what allowed me to apply that learning. Because now I had one of the most challenging courses in one of the best universities, and I got to see whether all of these mental gymnastics I'd now learned how to do, whether I could actually put them into practice. And that is the biggest advantage that Cambridge ever gave me. It was a platform for my personal growth. The academics, I wasn't into my subject in that way, but it gave me a chance to put all of these tools that I was learning into practice, because the ability to show up to do this kind of work on that intense level when you don't have that motivation, how do you deal with that? Well, that requires you to know yourself and to understand your value system, right? How do you, for example, get yourself to manage your time and do the things you love doing when you have all of these commitments? Again, it comes down to these kind of skills that you're building. So that was the biggest advantage. It challenged me. And because I'd reached out for help, so I knew I had that support, I felt like I could now try and grow my own wings. And if I were to fall, there would be a little net out there to catch me. That was the thing that saved me, right? The fact that I knew I had that, but it only came because I asked. I asked for that help. And whether you ask a parent, whether you ask a therapist, whether you ask a university counselor, reaching out to help matters. And they're really trying to do a bit more work on that now, to make sure it's more accessible. But use it as a platform for your personal growth. Use the challenge and the adversity in that situation of it being this intense place academically and everyone around you may be stressed. How can you find your calm in that? How can you find your way amidst everyone else's, right? How can you find a way that resonates with you? And my ethos for that third year was, I'd rather fail on my terms than succeed doing it someone else's way, right? A realization I would never have had without that situation, because I'd been so challenged from that. And I realized I don't want to succeed if it means I'm stressing out for 12 hours a day. I'd rather fail doing it my way, in this balanced way, than succeed like that. And then getting a first class that year and playing in varsity tennis matches and stuff just really validated that. And I felt so vindicated in that actually that worked. And I learned more about myself than I could ever imagined. And that has paved my path to this day. So that's the advantage it gave me, more than anything. It helped me to know myself.
Amazing. Cool. I think I had not a similar, but in third year I had definitely a lot of stress, and I actually instead of turning to a family network, I ended up turning to my university tutors. And we've briefly discussed this a bit before, but so for me, I started university, and I actually started a year younger. I was born middle of September. I'm born in the 6th of September, so I'm technically the year out. But it meant that I started school when I was 3, and I just went up that way. And it meant that I was always the youngest. And when I went to university, I'd only just turned 18. So it was a couple of weeks after I turned 18, and there were people there who were younger than me. But it was definitely a big leap. It was a really big leap for me to go from the home environment to university. And I was very, very fortunate with the fact that I still get on very well with one of my tutors. And my tutor Max is amazing. And he was my support throughout my time at university, and similar to you, I had a big wobble in third year. I actually stepped down for a year and then I went back. And he was the driving, or the motivator, the mentor through that. Again, there was a lot of external factors, but he would just sit down and listen, and that to me was great. But actually, my first year, I'd turned 18. I came straight to university. I was I thought it would maybe be easier than it was. I think that's maybe a preconception that a couple of people have. I had the similar doubt.
Yeah.
I had that, I don't think I should be here.
Mm.
And Max didn't help that. In the first dinner we ever had, he sat down and said, "I've probably made a mistake." And I took that as he's definitely made a mistake and it's me. And what he meant was, and he's explained it to me since, because I've mentioned it to him. He said, no, it's that what he was trying to say is that more people should have been here. Like a lot of people that he'd interviewed had the potential. And he said, there's probably someone out here who should be here. But being the kind of perfectionist girls that we all of us were, every single one of us he meant that I shouldn't be here. And we all took that stress on. And we all competed for the first year. We were very competitive for the first year. And it backfired quite a lot. So my first year, I didn't do so well in my first year exams. I did okay, but my tutors pulled me aside and said, "Look, you can talk way better than you can write." I was like, "Yeah, I know that." And they said, "But we think you're dyslexic." And it was only until the end of my first year at university that I was diagnosed, and they were the ones who pushed me. And more than that, they also said, "We know it's expensive to get diagnosed, so even if you're not dyslexic, we're going to pay for it," which was a really big thing, because having a dyslexia diagnosis is costly. And I had it mentioned from a sixth form teacher before, but I looked into how much it cost, and it wasn't something that I thought was worth the money. It was something I was holding back on. And they really pushed me. They were like, "We've booked it for you." So they gave me a list, and then they were like, "These people are near you. Off you go, do it." And they paid for it, and they were the ones who pushed me to go and get diagnosed. And I am moderate to severely dyslexic, and the kind of the test that comes out was quite stark. And I then really struggled with being dyslexic, because I think it's a kind of competitive nature thing. Finding out that you are not what you thought, I started blaming a lot on it. So it was like, I can't hand my work in on time, I'm dyslexic. I can't write an essay, I'm dyslexic. I'm disorganized, I'm dyslexic. And my tutors picked up on it, and they were like, "You need to stop blaming it, because you are letting it get to you in such a way that it's ruining what we can see in you." And Max was so honest with me, and I as I said, I still talk to him. I love the guy, because he was really honest with where I needed to improve, and sometimes to the point of almost brutality. So tutorials or seminars, you typically have 2-to-1 or 3-to-1, 2-to-1. I had some 1-to-1s, because my essay writing was really poor, and because biochemistry is an essay-based subject, all of it. Like, by the time you reach third year, you only have exams in third year, and they are all essays. So I think it's like 15 to 20 essays that you write in that week. And for someone who could not write an essay, and I just didn't know how to structure it. And it seems weird when I say that, because people think, well, you have to do that in GCSE. But in GCSE, you can follow a nice step-by-step method, and I couldn't do that for biochemistry. And I really struggled. And I struggled with note-taking, and I struggled with knowing how to study, because suddenly all of these things that I thought I was good at taking exams, and then it became that I wasn't. So he would have one-to-ones with me, and he would have two-to-ones where he would take my essay and he'd dissect it, and he would really rip it to shreds in front of my tube partner. My tube partner would come out going, well, he's not really told me anything about mine, but I know all about yours now. And I'd come out practically in tears. But he was in the way that he was doing it, he was well-meaning for it. And he would then take me and rewrite the essay with me. And the amount of support that he gave me allowed me to be able to write essays. And it was a process. It was a long process to work out how to do it. Because you were taking somebody who just, when I first of all started writing, I would write a page and then I would write a page of those little stars everywhere. It would be, you'd have to jump from 4 different pages to get, my organization was just all over the place. And he came up with a way that I could do it. And we sat down and we went through it. And I got to the third year and I had not learned enough of the course to do myself justice in the exams. And I knew it. And I absolutely knew it. And I was struggling. And I was struggling, similar to you, with, I think it's a time that a lot of things change. So again, relationships change and, family dynamics change. And I went to him 3 days before my exam and said, I can't do it. I cannot take these exams and I cannot do myself justice. And I know it's because of all the time that I've missed because I was trying to figure out how to make learning work for me. And he was so supportive. He was like, go. Just if you do not feel like you can do it, then either walk into that exam because I have faith in you, or if you feel like it's not you, go home. And I will be here when you get back. And he was. And I returned just before I sat my exams in third year. And he was there. And he mentored me the entire way through. And he would keep in contact via email. And that relationship between me and my tutors was the biggest advantage I had going to Oxford and Cambridge. It was that tutorial system, but not for the reason that people think the tutorial system.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's such a beautiful story. Like, honestly, and I said a lot of these things that we talk about can be translated to other universities around life skills and stuff, but the tutorial and supervision system, which again, I'm sure there are students there who have had negative experiences of that and the pressure they feel because of it, but it depends on you. And that's why the whole Oxbridge thing, I say, it depends on your child. It's not going to work for everyone. Like, it's not a system that benefits everyone. I know as many kids who've come out of Oxford and Cambridge and really flourished as I know have come out with mental health related challenges. That's the truth of it. I have friends who don't want to go back to those cities because of the bad memories they have. It depends on you as a person. It depends on good luck and bad luck as well, with things that you can and can't control. But it's not the right place for everyone. And that is not a bad thing. No. You know, we had a student in our school in QE who was a maths prodigy, so to speak, but he had a lot of complicated personal stuff going on and stuff. And he had very, very poor GCSEs, terrible first year AS grades. Trinity College, Cambridge gave him an offer for maths because he walked into the interview on a recommendation from one of the teachers at our school, nailed it, absolutely superb, gave him an offer for STEP. He just missed the offer for STEP maths because he didn't believe in studying for maths. He said either you know or you don't. But you know what? He went off to Warwick instead and has now carved a great career as a software developer, freelance, doing his thing. And because that environment was not as intense and directive the way that, say, Cambridge might be, it's not going to suit everyone, and that's not a bad thing. So these are the advantages we've had. And I said it was really heartwarming to hear your story with that, Jemma, because it makes me feel more faithful in the system as well, that there are tutors like Max as well. So that's really
cool. And I owe my Oxford experience to that one guy more than anything. And there's loads of advantages. I think there's, as we said, we both worked in consultancy, a career that is mainly populated by Oxbridge grads. I had a amazing internship for every single year that I did my degree, and I did not come from somewhere where I had that circle. My dad is a builder, my mum is a cleaner. I do not have I did my third year I think my third year was at Procter and Gamble. My second year was at KPMG. I had like some amazing experiences that I would not have got had it not
Yeah.
been due to those networks.
Hmm.
But the biggest thing for me, as I said, as you said, it's friendship, and it's the people that you meet, and the people that you meet really make it, and it make it for any
Yeah.
university.
That's the best thing about it. They're going to make it at any university. And I'm sure there are parents going, I don't want to pay 10 grand a year for my kid to make friends. They get a lot more than that. That's also an individual decision. There's got to be loads of things in like that's got to be kept in mind with that discussion. But we're just showing our honest experience of what the biggest advantages were. And part of that is the fact that, it did enable us to get jobs and to move in these directions. But that's what I genuinely value the most from that, as you do as well.
And I mean, when I took my first job, it came with a golden handshake, and it was a very well paid job,
Yeah,
and
same here.
and
Yeah,
it is true that Oxford and Cambridge typically you will earn more.
yeah.
It's not the reason I chose to study there, though. I
No,
didn't
not at
choose
all.
it knowing that, because I would have hated what I did if I had.
Yes, if you go in there, and again, that's something that I probably have to struggle with a bit more because I didn't have a passion for my course at all necessarily. And so I had to find a way to navigate the demands of that while not having that authentic kind of driver behind it. And I had no idea what I wanted to do in the future either. So I would just follow along with what others were doing. I only learned about management consulting or strategy consulting in my second year in Cambridge when people started to apply to them. And I was like, wait, I don't like this engineering stuff necessarily. And I gave engineering more of a try as well. So in my master's year, I worked in a few different engineering firms doing that. It just reinforced that path was not for me. But by that point, I'd kind of come across this field of performance psychology and coaching, and I was like, this seems like what I feel like I'm here to do. And going to Oxford or going to Cambridge in my case has helped with that. It has helped with that, and I can never deny the impact that has had
No.
in terms of the doors that it can just make a little bit easier to open. As I'm
I
sure
think
many,
also the old boys, old girls network is something not to be underestimated. We both
mm,
talked about friends, but I think
yeah,
it's also worth saying that a lot of those friends are now in places where we can work with them, or we
yes,
can work for them, or we can
exactly,
utilize their experience.
yep,
I'm now getting to the point. I went back to my first alumni dinner last year,
mm,
and some of those people have achieved really, really great things.
yeah,
And it's quite awe-inspiring to look around and to realize the amount of people that own their own companies, or the amount of people that are working high up in law degrees, or are working in big banking all over the world. And to realize I went to university with those, and I went out on a night with them, and now they are becoming world leaders, and that's amazing. That's really fun.
it's so wonderful. I mean, some of my clients are not my closest friends, of course, from there, but there are people that I studied with. And, these are people who are excelling in the top of their fields. And I am so grateful for it because they have the mentality that I understand and they trust me because they think I understand them. And that creates that relationship. And 100%, it's inspiring. And the networking, I almost say in a weird way, it would probably be easier for me to get back into consulting now if I wanted to, because of the quality of relations I have with those people, than it would have been for me to go directly out of university. So we can't discount the power of that network as well.
Not at all.
But again, LSE, Warwick, these kind of places, they also have strong networks too, strong ties with these kind of industries. So it's not the end all be all. So
No.
yeah.
I think if I'm thinking kind of winding down a little bit, but in terms of, I suppose, the advantage that's often talked about is that whole idea of studying with world experts. And
Yes.
for
Yeah.
me, it was something I loved. But
Mm.
interestingly, I don't know whether you feel the same, because your subject love wasn't really the same as
Yeah.
mine.
I have a moment when it kicked in. So just to put in context, in my first year natural sciences, two of our lecturers wrote like the Bible of chemistry. Peter Wathers, who is, he was like a world-renowned expert in chemistry, and James Keeler. And people
Okay,
would
yeah,
go
I
at
know
the end,
Kira.
yeah, people would go
What
at
the
the
book?
end of lectures and get them to sign their books, and they would get fan mail from students. And I remember thinking to myself and some of my friends, what on earth is this? Like, what is this? This is ridiculous. My director of studies in my third year for manufacturing engineering was Professor Sir Mike Gregory, knighted professor, And
Yeah,
to me, he was just this funny guy who just, would make some jokes, and he was quite happy with how I was doing, and that was it. When it really hit me was in my fourth year, when two of the students that I'd worked with in China through one of the summer school schemes came to Cambridge because they'd won a scholarship award from the school that they were at. And I took them around, and seeing their faces when I took them to the Cavendish labs, I just realized, if I'm not careful, I'm going to leave here and having never seen this the way that they have.
yeah,
That would have been my fault, and I'd regret that. And that was a very transformational moment for me, because at that point I had about 7 months left of my time in Cambridge. And I really tried to look at it with their eyes. So I would walk through St. John's College and just kind of just gaze there and go, this is a really beautiful place to be. Who else has walked the same pathway as I'm doing right now? That is staggering, right? And I really tried to connect with that. I wouldn't call it an advantage. I just call it making the most of an opportunity and not taking it for granted. But that was when it really struck me. I didn't get too awestruck by lectures and stuff again, just because I didn't know so much about them.
yeah.
But now really appreciate that the people there, I mean, they're world leaders in what they do, and that is a beautiful, beautiful experience.
Yeah. I mean, Max, who is my tutor, he worked, by the time he came to me, he'd gone to Oxford, graduated, and then become a lecturer, which is what one of my friends has done now. And we always said he'd never left. And he actually had his first daughter whilst we were studying with him, which was really lovely, because he kind of went from this very, very academic guy who'd spent his whole life, and he still had a room in Oxford, even though he had a wife, and he still had his room. And then he had a daughter and realized that life priorities kind of changed a little bit. But first of all, he spent probably 20 years of his life researching HIV. HIV is an incredibly hard thing to research, and so many challenges. He had all sorts, and indeed, he actually, a couple of years ago, when I left, he also left, and he went down to Portsmouth, and he worked with cancer, and looked at cancer. But what he focused on was HIV and sugars in HIV. And COVID has just come, and now his research is really poignant, because COVID sugars on the outside of the virus are similar to HIV sugars on the outside of the virus, and all his research is now suddenly all over the place. And it's really cool to see, because he's a guy who has spent his whole life working on something that he knows is really hard, and he's probably never going to get the appreciation. He once got a chemical compound that reduced the amount of HIV. I think it was like 0.2%, and he was like, "Yeah, it's not going to work." And he'd worked for years on it. That's what you do in science, it's a problem. But at the same time, to see him, he's in Forbes, he's in the BBC, he's in the Telegraph, he's everywhere, and to see his work being published and being talked about like that is amazing. My other tutor works on a really specific genetic disease called Werner's syndrome, which is you get children who are prematurely old. So essentially, you get 6-year-olds that look like 90-year-olds, and she works in this very specific area of expertise, and she's actually the reason I ended up thinking of Oriole, because I was fascinated with this disease when I was younger. So it was amazing to learn from those people, and just the opportunities that it gave you. So for me, the subject, and then the other thing was, I was fortunate enough to work with the Oxford Access Scheme, because I know I came from a background where I wasn't the typical person that would apply, and so part of what I wanted to do was to give back, and was to work with Access And one of my best moments at Oxford, and I like to tell people about this because I love it. I got to meet Michelle Obama.
Wow. Wow. That's
It was great. And the only reason I did it was because I was working with the Oxford Access team, and she happened to visit with a school that we were supporting, and it was great. And I got to meet her, and I had a hug, and it was amazing. But it's a bit of an unusual advantage, not an advantage, but it is just so cool to do some of those things that you get to do.
It really is. It really is.
So I think the last thing is just to talk about, and I'm aware that we have talked for ages, and I'm sorry, you must have been running out of voice. The last thing is just I know some people have asked about the application process, because it is different between Oxford and Cambridge.
Yes.
And there are nuances that you need to be aware of. So do you want to start, or do you want me to start?
I think this is your area of expertise, Gemma. I mean,
Okay.
I'm a humble mindset performance coach. I'm familiar with this, but this is your area. So I'm gonna leave that mainly for you to start, and I'll chip in when I can with input.
Okay. So I think both of them require high GCSEs, which is a given.
Yes.
However,
specifically speaking, yeah.
However, I would say Oxford tend to put a bit more of an emphasis on it. And if you haven't got that clean sweep with 8s and 9s, you're probably looking more at Cambridge than Oxford.
Yep.
That said, I know of people who enter with like 2 7s. It depends on what you're going for, and it depends what those subjects are in.
That's a really key part of it, is the subject thing. We can focus on that in a bit, I guess, after we go through the application processes.
Yeah. So I think it's a slight more input on the GCSE. Different tests as well. Different admissions tests. So if you are looking, and interestingly, natural sciences now does have a test. Am I right? There is now a test.
There is now a natural sciences test for Cambridge as well. You have pretty much admissions tests for nearly every subject nowadays, pretty much. All the main
Biochemistry
ones.
still doesn't.
Like you guys, that's where everyone's going to be applying now.
One of the few, yes, but they are different, and they are different in the way that they're set out. So I know that, for example, the economics and management at Oxford being quite different to the economics test in Cambridge. Those two are pretty different.
Really, really different. Yeah, definitely.
We've got also application. Cambridge has
we have the SAQ. We have the Supplementary Application Questionnaire. That served quite a bit of utility back in the day, because you could actually put in like the grades that you've got in the modules you've done, so that in the interviews they actually ask you questions related to what you've done. They're very aware that for a lot of students who have science backgrounds, when you write your personal statement, you don't specifically talk about different modules, whereas with humanities, interview focuses are often on some parts of your personal statement, which are then elaborated and expanded upon in ways you can't imagine. So what the Supplementary Application Questionnaire does help them with is what topics you have covered and what you haven't. And also there's elements of it in terms of any additional information. I know that as well with Cambridge, of course, if you're applying to a course that's a bit more niche. So let's say in other universities, you're applying for economics, but in Cambridge, you're going for land economics. You can put in additional personal statements, specifically talking a bit about that to help with that. But they often say that is not compulsory to do anything for the additional personal statement. Admissions students say that will not detriment your application if you don't do that.
But they give it to you, right?
They do.
Why would you throw that opportunity away?
Exactly. It's how much, this is the thing, right? Every little thing that shows that you want it just that 1% more can count in your favor. You don't know how it's going to count. You don't know where it contributes to. But the other part is you just get to research more about your subject, about the course. That's not a disadvantage. Think of it as a way to communicate your passion and your joy without it being so formally assessed, Yeah.
The other thing is that some courses, and again, it gets really course specific, and I will pre-call this by saying when I do university applications, I use a whole host of experts.
Yeah.
So I am very much focusing on this from a biological, biochemical sciences point of view. Something like history, something like English is less of my area because I have specialists who deal with that. But I know that for something at Cambridge like human political science, that's something you need additional essays for.
Yes, so HSPS is the Cambridge course, Human Sociopolitical Sciences. It's actually the course that my partner studied. And you'll need additional essays for that to bolster your application. That's needed. Again, because they're looking at things like your writing style and stuff like that, and areas of interest as well, that will relate to who you might get as your interviewers as well. So they really are quite big on having those external essays.
Whereas sometimes in some of the Oxford tests, you will be asked to write essays as part of the test. So they tend to be slightly different. I know for the Cambridge one, you can select what you're going to put in, whereas Oxford tends to be, not always, not for all subjects, but it tends to be more focused around the test, and the test may well ask you to write something about a specific topic or an area that you are interested in, but it may not be that you've pre-selected it. So both of them want high predicted grades. That's an obvious.
It's minimum.
Both of them want around 90% of academic information on your personal statement, about 10%. And that 10% needs to be about stuff like leadership and teamwork and demonstration.
I've met countless students who've gone to both who their entire personal statement was academic. Not even to mention one of my past clients, she got into history and economics at Oxford University, and she was the head girl at a kind of like I guess it's kind of a grammar school, Dame Alice Owens, and her entire personal statement was just amazing writing on these topics, and that she was passionate about, and she just relied on her teachers additional recommendations. Say, oh, by the way, she was also head girl. By the way, she was also captain of the hockey team. By the way, this
Not
and that.
Important, you know. And yet I have never found someone who's done it the other way around, because they don't care. It's not important.
No, Oxbridge, when it comes to your amazing sports prowess, your music is different if you're applying for music and stuff like that. But certainly with things like sports, again, they don't always look on it that fondly either, because they wonder whether you're going to be able to commit to these kind of things. At the same time, they are all about excellence. So if a student is someone who is, looking to be professional in certain ways, they'll definitely keep it in mind. If they meet the academic requirements and they're a strong candidate, it won't detriment their application. But they don't need to see it on your personal statement. They really don't mind whether that's there or not. Other universities, though, that you apply to may like that. So, for example, again, if I'm applying to Loughborough, it's good to put my tennis background perhaps on there if I'm thinking about doing that there as well. Just a little thing about how I would contribute perhaps to the university in some way. We're not talking about US university, so we don't even need to go down that rabbit hole because it's very different. But for Oxbridge, it's mainly academic. That's what they care about, academic and experience as well. So if you've done, for medicine and stuff, experience is vital for any medicine course. For engineering, if you've done something with engineering, projects that you've done, MOOCs, online courses, that you've done, and showing that you've created something through those that you can talk about is really, really helpful. So for me, I referenced the engineering education scheme I did. I know students who've done other projects, they've designed things, they've coded things, they've created programs, whatever it is. These are things that you can talk about for those kind of subjects.
Perfect. And then when it gets to the interviews, they're a little bit different with that as well.
Yes.
So Oxford will traditionally, not happen this year, but traditionally will invite you up for 2 to 3 days, and they will keep you there, and you will have usually an initial interview, possibly 2 at your original college, and then you will be put in another college, and you could be put in 2 other colleges whilst you are up there. So it's quite intense. You go up, you stay, you are there overnight, you're there possibly for a couple of days. In my case, we were actually called for another day. So I was all packed and ready to go home, and somebody was like, by the way, Gemma, we're meant to stay another day. I had my suitcase, And luckily someone called me back. But you are expected to be up there. You are interviewed at more than one college, and the decision is pretty much taken at that point. So behind the scenes, what happens is they pre-rank you. It sounds very, it is quite technical, and it is quite, there's a complex formula that I will not go into, but they essentially look at your personal statement, your grades, your teacher references. They form that as a cutoff, and your admissions tests. They do the cutoff, and then they interview you at several colleges, and each college gives you a scoring.
Yeah.
And that scoring, then after you go home, Oxford makes its decisions at that point, and that the decision that you will get is a yes or a no, because they have all the data that they need. You might be accepted at the college you applied to. You might be accepted at the college that you second interviewed at. You might be accepted at a college that did not interview you. And it happens because they've got the rankings of everybody. So first college might say, this was a really great student, but we don't have space for them.
Yeah.
Second college might say, they were a good student, but we think we probably got better. And then there might be another college that goes, well, they look like they're a good candidate, so we're going to have them. So they will make the decision all at that one point. You will be unaware of that they're making that decision, but you will be doing your interviews, and it will all happen in one.
Yeah.
Cambridge is not, because you have the pooling system.
Yes. So Cambridge is a little different. Just on that note, I guess briefly as well, with Oxford, they interview far fewer candidates, right, compared to Cambridge. So Oxford will cut out a lot of...
It depends on the course, but...
It doesn't. Yeah. All of these things, sadly, course dependent. But in general, Oxford will interview fewer candidates and give more offers to the students that they interview in comparison. Again, course dependent. Whereas with Cambridge, they will interview up to something like 75% of candidates that apply, provided they've met certain thresholds. And then because of that, because they have a high number of students applying, they have the way Cambridge system work is, again, and this is pre-COVID times, but your interviews are set on a certain day. You'll often have 2, maybe 3 sometimes for some subjects, or at some colleges. It'll pretty much be in the same college, not necessarily to the one that you applied to, but it will normally be pretty much there, though your interviewers may be sometimes from different colleges. That depends entirely on the course that you've gone for and the college you're applying to. But for me, it was as much as get a train up, navigate my way through the maze, leave plenty of time for the taxi to get me where I need to go, because it's a bit far to walk to Churchill on the other side, and then try and navigate the maze to get to my interview rooms. And, I did do my 2 interviews, and then the way that the behind the scenes, I know how it worked for Churchill College. There's actually an article in The Guardian about this many years ago, where a lot of them interview supervisors kind of sit around and they will go through each candidate turn by turn, and they will kind of discuss, again, for them, especially for sciences, grades are the biggest priority. Now, because of course schools can give grades and stuff that don't count as much, the admissions tests do also bear quite a bit of weight. So it's really important to give your absolute best to those, like just try and get as high as you can. And then the interview is what can really, again, bolster someone's application if they were kind of average, and ideally just reinforce that you're a strong candidate. If you perhaps, if you've already gotten the grades, and they'll kind of discuss that. And if they believe that you could do well there and so on, but they have doubts, they're just going to make you a high offer. They're going to make you a pretty high offer. So Cambridge, again, stereotypically, their main normal offers are around 2 A stars and an A, or 2 A stars and 2 A's, depending. Oxford, most of their humanities ones are still A's. But then sometimes now A star, AA, it becomes more of like something that they're now throwing in there for sciences subjects and some of the more competitive courses. But Cambridge give higher offers because they have more people they give offers to. So the thing is that a lot of people don't make their offers. And that's especially in the case of sciences.
Oxford's done that pre-cut.
Exactly.
You've done it a lot earlier.
Exactly.
Do you mind talking us through the pooling system? Just because I know that people would have heard about the word pool, and they're not entirely certain what that means.
Yeah, of course. So the idea here is that, again, it's quite similar in the sense of let's say I applied for Churchill College and I did all right in my interviews and stuff, but they just had a lot of good candidates that year for that course. And they thought, okay, we think he could be a good candidate. What they'll do is they put me in a pool along with other candidates who fit this requirement. And what can happen then is another college who perhaps hasn't got the number of students they need for that course can pick you out of the pool and either, depending on how strong your interviews were, can make you a direct offer, or they might even invite you for another interview. And so, again, and it's not so much that you apply to one of the more popular colleges and then you go the other way. I had a student who applied to a college called Selwyn for Economics, which was one of the ones which didn't need further maths. And he got a really good score in that, but they just had so many students applying there because it's one of the more popular ones for economics to be applied to. They put him in the pool. Trinity College picked him out of the pool for an interview, and he narrowly missed that one, unfortunately, but is now leading a great life, having gone to Warwick and working in banking, doing great.
It is worth saying that Trinity is the Cambridge College for Maths and has it requires its maths students to do an additional exam called the STEP, and it's really competitive.
Almost every Cambridge college requires you to do STEP for maths, pretty much, and this is why with maths they make again, it's a very competitive course at both universities, really competitive. With Cambridge, they give, I think, just over 50% of students who will actually meet their STEP offers. So a lot of students will get STEP offers, not even a lot, but students will get STEP offers and not meet them. So it's a really challenging test. And yeah, that is the kind of Cambridge process. There's also something called the summer pool, which I don't know how much about what's going to happen now with COVID because Cambridge took on too many students that they made offers to in the last few years. So unfortunately now they have to kind of ease that balance of it. So they're going to make more offers for deferred places and just try and ease that curve, I guess, and ease that demand. But it did mean that unfortunately this year, slightly fewer offers were made because they had to adjust for that.
So there is an interesting article where, I don't know if you've seen it, Cambridge this year have said to their offer holders, if you make your offer but someone else is more competitive, you might have to defer.
That seems you might have to defer. That's the thing. There was actually a couple of clickbait related articles which said, no, they can take your place away from you. No, they've confirmed that it's just that they will ask you to defer and take an enforced gap year, essentially, if you wish to go there.
Whereas Oxford isn't doing that because they have that smaller number that they have offered to because of the slight difference. How long can the pool last? Because again, I know that there are people, I've had students who've waited around in that pool for a little while before being pulled out and given a place. It seems a little bit unusual sometimes.
It does. So with the winter pool, so normally, again, it changes each year. This year was delayed, so offers were made quite a bit later. Cambridge, I think, all came out on 25th of January this year, pretty much. So normally when it used to come around the 6th of January, you could pretty much wait till near the end of January to hear whether or not you got out of the pool or not. Again, different colleges have different processes for this. The summer pool is a concept that came about because if they had a lot of students that they had offers given to who all didn't meet their offers, again, that college would have spare capacity. They could fish someone out of that pool who had perhaps been in that winter pool that didn't take out of it, but did really well in their A-level grades. So Cambridge has a more convoluted system. How long you can expect to wait, it really depends. I've heard all sorts of different things from 2 weeks through to over a month.
I've had students who've waited a while and then suddenly have been pulled out and they've been successful. I have someone who got put in the pool and pulled out the next day. So they rang me up and said, I've been pulled. And then the next day they actually got pulled out by the original college as well.
That also happens.
It does happen. It does happen. It's a little bit unusual, but it happens.
I just like to mess with you.
The other thing that's happened with Cambridge, which hasn't happened with Oxford yet, is that Cambridge went into adjustment a couple of years ago.
Yes, they did.
Oxford did not. So that was unusual because what it meant was they were offering their places, or the places that for the students who hadn't got those grades, out to people that they hadn't necessarily seen before. They weren't looking at it in terms of a pool. They actually were doing a full adjustment process. And I think at some point on the Oxford University journey, we will probably write about what adjustment and clearing and all of those terminologies mean. But it does mean that that Cambridge tends to have a wider offering process, but more people don't make those offers.
Yeah.
Oxford has a lot more pre-selection, but more people reach their offers.
Once they get that, they're more likely to meet it. No, absolutely.
Individual subjects differ. There's loads of different subject
We can name some of the
differences.
most competitive ones. I thought this was a fun one because, just so economics and management at Oxford is one of the most popular courses. You're looking at almost 1 in 17 students who apply are likely to get in. That is around 6%. Really, really low.
There is a but though on that.
Which
a lot
is?
of people who apply for economics and management really want business. So there's a large amount of applicants who haven't read the syllabus a lot. They haven't read what the first year looks like, and they're automatically gone.
Automatically.
So they should have been applying for business and management somewhere else, but they wanted the name of Oxford and Cambridge, so they applied there. So it's due to that. That's why
that gets skewed.
Statistic.
Computer science at both universities, very competitive. Oxford, 1 in nearly 15 students. Cambridge is like below 10% of students again. So again, really, really low. Medicine at Oxford, I think you actually commented about this. Medicine
double the amount at Cambridge.
Double the amount.
Double the amount of places.
Cambridge offer double.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that the application statistics are different though, because if you've got more places, you have more people who apply. So
I think actually I saw that overall what happens with Cambridge, I think I have the statistics actually, is with Cambridge you still end up in terms of your success rate, so number of applicants to actually getting in, it's 17.7% of applicants will successfully apply, get the interview and get their offer, whereas with Oxford you're actually looking at just below 10%. So it is actually still quite pronounced. So yeah, that's the Oxford medicine course.
It is also worth saying with medicine that the Oxford and Cambridge course is quite different to other courses. So if you are looking at medicine, really look through those courses, because you really need to know the difference. I'm going to probably leave the medicine stuff to another
one.
But
same goes for many different subjects, right? I think you were mentioning how with English, for example, Oxford's course for English is a lot more about language focus and the classic side of things in terms of that's going to be a lot of what composed it, whereas Cambridge's one's a bit of a newer perhaps syllabus and it has room to explore more new things around
get more like feminist authors, more modern poets, whereas Oxford is a lot more classical and a lot more traditional.
Absolutely. No, the stats are just, I find them so fascinating. I mean, again, this is Cambridge's 2019 ones that I've got over here. Engineering, you have about a 15% chance for each student who applies, which is fairly decent from Cambridge. Natural sciences, 20%. 1 in 5 students who apply will actually meet an offer, and that's because they take so many students. And this doesn't take into account the fact that some are applying for biological natural sciences, others for other side of things. For the humanities, economics is very competitive. So no matter where you want to do that, whether it's in the form of economics and management, Oxford's PPE course, again, very competitive, 10% also. Cambridge's one for economics is 13.6%. So again, really, really small numbers for that. Law at Cambridge, you're looking at, again, just under 15%, which is, so again, really competitive. The ones which are higher, interesting, classics at Cambridge, which I believe classics at Oxford is more popular or seen as a bit more of like an advanced classics course, but it's got a reputation. But with Cambridge, 50% of people who apply for classics at Cambridge. And that's partly because so few schools do it. It's quite ridiculous.
And how big is that? Because also these statistics often get skewed by, I know, like history of art or fine art in Oxford.
So I can tell you this. So in 2019, they had 134 applicants for Cambridge's 3 years classics course. 81 offers were made. 66 met that offer, which is a lot. It's a small year. And then modern medieval languages at Cambridge as well, which is their language-based courses. They had 417 applying, and in the end, 159 accepted through offers. That's 38%. So that's over a third. People, nearly 2/5.
Which,
again,
if you looked at some of the London unis, would be lower than that. I think. So
absolutely.
It's worth considering that sometimes the preconception is that it's the most competitive, but I know that it's not for everything.
Nope.
The other thing that flashed through my mind was that there are these these very small courses or small course combinations.
Yes.
And you can fall into a bit of a quagmire with the whole it's a complex thing.
Yeah.
Ultimately, you want to look up the subject that you want to study on the Oxford or Cambridge website, but often there gets this banded around the whole, you can't do this subject with this subject at this university, or sometimes you can't do a specific subject at a college, and that would mean just that the college doesn't have the tutors.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that the whole university won't do it.
Yeah,
You've got to be really quite careful with it.
Yeah, like my college charter, they don't do land economics, but a lot of other colleges at Cambridge do land ec, which a lot of people think is easier to get into than economics. Again, it isn't, statistically speaking. It's around, again, just over, it's a bit easier, 16%, but that's still really challenging because they take fewer people, right? So it's basically, with the statistics game, don't overthink it. Don't overthink it. And especially with college applications and which college you apply to, because a number of times I think we've both seen people kind of see one, but they had this number of like state school kids going here that was good, and suddenly you see a massive spike in them for next year because everyone has seen the same statistic.
And unfortunately, I've seen admissions advice around this college is the one to go for. My advice to students is always go for the one you like, because you also might get moved before you even apply. So very often you'll apply to a college, that college might be oversubscribed, and you might be interviewed by a different college. And then you might end up getting a place at a different college. So that whole trying to work out statistically, this college has had a slightly better chance, or this subject has a slightly better chance than this subject. Go for the one that you really want to do because it shines through in subject. And for the college, as Cam said, you will find that if one college has a lower number of applicants one year, it's going to have a much higher the next year. Everybody watches it, and it just does this all the time. So don't make your choice based, especially for college, on statistics. For course, pick the one you want to do. Don't pick the one that you think you're going to have more chance of getting in. You won't enjoy it.
You won't.
Perfect. All right. I have taken 2 hours of your time.
This has been brilliant, though. I really, really hope it's helpful. I hope it's a helpful resource for anyone. I hope the blend of information was good and helpful. It's been a real pleasure. Lovely spending the Saturday.
I hope everyone else has, but I've enjoyed it especially.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. All right. And I'm sure as you would say, I'd say the same, is if anyone has any questions, do pop them in the group, because if you have that question, someone else will have that question too.
Yes.
Cam and I will be happy to answer any questions that we have. Just to reiterate that I run the Education Hotel. We offer support with universities and school placements, and Cam runs the Exam Success Academy, and is the person to go to for performance and exam mindsets.
Yeah, if it comes to stress, if it comes to low motivation, these kind of things, that's what I try and help students with, giving them the tools to help them overcome that and perform in a sustainable way, right? Excelling academically, but keeping their mental well-being, physical health on point as well.
Brilliant. Awesome. And we want to say thanks so much for Saba, who runs the Oxford University Journey. Thank you, and thank you for letting us run on so long. I hope it's been helpful. I hope it's been enjoyable. That's it from us.
Yeah. I think one thing we can do, by the way, just a final thing, we can add like little track listings for this when we repost it. Yeah. So because there's parts which we're just telling stories, and I'm sure hopefully people enjoyed those, but we can just let them know that if they want that stuff, jump here. If they want this stuff, go there.
Brill.
It's been a pleasure.
All right. Perfect. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.